Welcome to A Cup of Gratitude with Amanda Schaefer. Hi, I'm your host, and I'm so glad you stopped by. This podcast is really for anyone, anywhere, anytime. And it's about taking a moment to slow down and look around and actually see all of the good things that are there. There's no question that asks, is your cup half empty or half full? But I think a better question is, what's in your cup? I mean, a drop of gratitude will benefit your life unimaginably more than a full cup of anything else. So let's settle in and take a look at how we can shift our focus and embrace the joy and the wonder of the life that we have. And once you start, you won't be able to stop seeing the good. And just like me, you won't be able to stop talking about it. And somehow that creates even more. Even in the midst of difficulty, even when it's really hard, learn how to drink from a cup of gratitude. Welcome. Today we are talking with Emily Rogers. Emily is an artist in the Philadelphia area. She studied fine art in college and now, 4 years post-graduation, is balancing a photography business and a 9-to-5 job, serving at her local church, and finding time to have a social life in between. Throughout the past few years, Emily has struggled with anxiety and depression, but through putting her trust in God, has been able to manage it and use God's strength to pour into the next generation. That's amazing, Emily. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
Me too.
So let's start at the beginning. Could you tell us a little bit about your childhood?
Yeah. So I grew up in a Christian home. I lived with my mom, my dad, my sister.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up right outside of Hershey, Pennsylvania. So it's kind of a small farm town. And my dad was a pastor. So we kind of pretty much lived at the church. Actually, we lived right next to the church.
Okay.
And when I was about 12 years old, we moved to the Philly suburb area and have pretty much been there ever since.
What was it like moving from such a rural place to a suburb like the Philly suburb?
It was a challenge. I was a dramatic teenager. I was in middle school, so I didn't want to do anything.
Well, I think most of us were a little bit dramatic in those years, but I know what Hershey, Pennsylvania is like, and I know where you moved because I lived there as well. It's like two different countries.
Yeah, it's culturally very different.
Yeah.
So it was some adjustment, but I had a really good group of friends where I used to live, and that's where I lived my whole life. And I was like, I don't want to move. This is great. Why would I want to go anywhere else? So it was a bit challenging, and I definitely made that very known to my family.
So you weren't quiet about it. Okay.
No, not at all. And one challenging thing was, as we were moving, my dad was really struggling with depression. And so it was really confusing for me. It's like leading up to this big move that I'm supposed to be excited for, but seeing him experience this.
What was that like for you? How did that affect you?
I didn't really fully understand what was going on. We didn't really talk about it too much. Like my parents sort of explained what was going on, but for a 12-year-old, it's, you're never going to fully understand it. So it was difficult.
Yeah. I mean, especially it being your parent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it took a while for me to kind of understand. He pretty much took a break from preaching for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, most days he just kind of sat on the couch and just was there quietly.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand why. And I kind of, for a while, felt like was my reaction to moving one of the reasons that he was so upset.
Oh, wow.
Because I was so defiant, was like, I'm not moving. And I'm like, is this why he's feeling this way?
Wow, that's such a shame. That must have been a burden for you. Did you let anyone know you felt that way?
Not really. And I feel like as I got older, I realized it's more to it than that.
Yeah.
It's not,
but
it's not as simple as that.
Yeah, but that means that you carried that for a little while.
Yeah. And that made the move just a little bit more difficult because none of us were really we were excited in some sense, but not overly this is going to be amazing.
Yeah.
we were all kind of experiencing it together. Like, okay, this is going to be difficult. Like,
Well, I
let's
mean,
see what happens.
you left Hershey, Pennsylvania, which is known for its chocolate and
Oh,
its
yeah.
fun rides. So let alone your friends, and that's where you always lived. I can imagine like, moving to a suburb of Philly might not be quite as, enamoring of
Yeah.
a thought. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Now, what was it like for you trying to navigate going to a new school? I mean, that's an awkward age to be the new kid.
Yeah, it was going into 8th grade. So it was our last year of middle school.
Hmm.
And I went from a class that was about 100 students per grade to about 400. So
Wow.
I went from knowing every single classmate of mine to knowing 0 students. So that was hard to like walk through the halls and be like, I know no one,
Wow.
and just try to figure all that out. It was just a very difficult time. In 8th grade, everyone's dramatic and sassy. No one wants to make new friends. So it was
Right.
it was hard.
Do you remember who the first person was that you became friends with?
I remember some of like my original friends, and most of them I'm not really even friends with anymore.
Well, that happens. Yeah.
Yeah, I have one friend who I made in 8th grade, who I'm still really close with now, and that was pretty much it.
Yeah. I'm glad you had one keeper. I don't have
Yeah,
any friends that I was friends with in 8th grade.
yeah,
A few in high school, but that's because I had the opposite experience. I went to public school and then I switched to private school. So in my last 4 years of school, I was in 100 people per grade kind of situation. So between that and Facebook is really the only reason why I know a lot of them.
yeah. Right. That's literally how I've kept in contact with everyone.
Now, your dad left the ministry, which is really all you had ever known him to do. Did
Mhm.
that affect your faith in any way?
Yeah, he left the ministry when I was going into my junior year of high school. So I was just about to turn 16.
Hmm.
And so another confusing time in my
Yep.
life. And I really like questioned a lot of things when he left. It was not really sure why God was like calling him to something else,
Hmm.
why we had been so used to one thing. And, you think when someone's called to the ministry that's it.
Yeah.
Like that's the end goal. And it was strange to be like, no, that's not what we're going to do anymore.
Well, you had also told me during our pre-recording call that like your entire family was at church all the time. Like
Yeah.
you were constantly doing things to serve, and I'm sure because you lived right next door, you probably were the ones to open up the place and
Yep.
get
Exactly.
things set up for events. And so you went from that to
Yeah.
moving.
I had freedom. I didn't have to, if I
Yeah.
didn't feel like going to church on a Sunday, it
Yeah.
was like, okay, well, you don't have to.
Wow.
And so I kind of like took that rebellion. It was like, okay, I don't have to do all these things, so I'm not going to.
Yeah.
So
That's
that was not the best thing for me, but
pretty typical, though. Pretty typical. Most kids between the age of 16 and college, even if they've gone to church regularly, either stop going, question going, find their own church. It's just it is part of growing up and defining faith for yourself.
yeah, yeah. And I was lucky that my parents still immediately jumped into another church and were
Hmm.
still involved and kind of tried to keep that going for me. But,
Yeah.
and they, still tried to force me to go as much as I could. So that was good at least.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was about that age, sitting in the pew thinking about what outfit I was going to wear when I went out on my date. I wasn't really paying attention at that time.
Oh, yeah.
It took me till 20 years ago to really know Jesus, and I'm 57. So even though I went to church every week, I can't say that I was really present or knew what was going on.
Right.
You can't really force somebody else to have a relationship with God. Um,
Exactly.
so yeah. So what was it like for you when you went off to college? I mean, did you embrace your new freedom? I mean, that's going to be really a big tick up in freedom to go off to school.
Yeah, absolutely. It was kind of like a fresh start for me. I'd
Yeah.
always been known as like the pastor's kid.
Yeah.
So this was like totally new opportunity for me that no one knew who I was, what my background was, and I could kind of choose what path I wanted to go down, the friends I wanted to make without them knowing
Yeah.
anything about me.
Did
So
you
I was excited.
did you do anything really, really new or different, like change the way that you dressed or try things that you hadn't done before, or did you pretty much stay the same?
I think I did some things. I got my nose pierced because that was probably the most rebellious I could get.
That's
Uh,
that's pretty cool. Yeah.
yeah. And plus, I went to art school, so that was
Yeah.
you got to do something to fit in, and no one fits in art school.
Yeah.
So, and I really started like I made a bunch of friends who we all were drinking and partying on weekends, which was
Mhm.
something I had not done before. And I was like, this is what people do in college, so this is what I'm going to do in college.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I went off to New York City. I went to NYU, and everybody was either in some form of the arts. They were doing film, and I was there for dramatic writing. So I was supposed to be doing the writing, but I had to also minor in things like acting and film. So
yeah.
I am still probably out there. I was in so many student films. They were all appropriate, but so angsty.
Yep.
um, I'd love to get a hold of one because oh my gosh! But
That
it
would be
was
awesome.
it was a really neat time. But yeah, I think we all experiment with. I remember that was the time when I decided what my favorite beer was, and it was only because it was really hard to pronounce.
That's amazing.
Seriously, I mean, like I kept telling everyone how wonderful it was. I don't even drink now, but it was called Dinkelacker. I'll
You
never
just got to
forget it. Yeah.
pick the most unique thing, and that's what you go with.
That's what I went with, made it seem like I really knew what I was talking about. Oh my gosh. Anyway, so you studied fine arts. What was it like being around a lot of other artists?
It was really cool. It was just such a creative environment, and everyone was so encouraging all the time. And it was nice to be at an art school, but also be at a public school.
Yeah.
I just went to like a normal state college, so I kind of had a good balance of like the normal college experience, but also, when I entered the art building, it was a completely different world. So it was
Yeah.
really nice to just, if I needed to escape from creating for a day, I had that opportunity. And if I needed to escape like reality, I had the art building I could walk into, and it felt so much different.
Yeah. Sounded like a safe place for you.
Yeah.
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 Now, what was your college experience really like? I mean, you said that your friends were drinking and partying a lot. What was a typical week at school like for you? Like, how much schoolwork did you do and how much partying did you do?
I feel like during the week, I was somewhat of a different person. I had long classes. There was days I had 9 hours of classes a day.
Uh-huh.
So I was just, class after class, lectures, and uh, did a bunch of stuff with creating. And then once pretty much Friday night hit, just completely different person.
Yeah.
I just kind of would leave the art building and go on to the next life. And so me and my friends pretty much just, we drank a lot, go to the bar, because there was only one bar in the town.
Oh, wow.
It's not a Bay
It
Area.
was really the bar.
Yeah. And I mean, I had a lot of fun, but I was just kind of trying to fit in. So I didn't always feel like I was myself when doing that.
I was going to ask, did it feel kind of empty?
It definitely did. Once I kind of would, sometimes when you're going out, you get to a certain point where you just aren't yourself because you
Yeah.
drank so much. But just kind of getting to that point, just a lot of times did feel really empty and lonely. And I would just kind of push through it because I was like, this is what you do.
Yeah. I wish I would have known better. I wish I would have known that I actually prefer life without drinking or doing anything. Like I like to experience the actual moment and know and remember it.
Yeah.
But, when I was
Yeah, I'm like, I
younger,
wish I would have realized how much fun it is without
yeah.
it.
Yeah. I mean, and I could drink if I want to, but Honestly, because of family history with other people than our family, we've decided all not to drink, just to be the sober person in the room for
Yeah.
somebody else. And honestly, I have more fun than the people who are drinking. I just
Right?
really life. Yeah.
You can just be yourself and not
Yeah.
care.
Yeah.
That's great.
Now, you had told me in our pre-recording call that in your junior year, something shifted.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that time? What was that like for you?
Yeah. So I had kind of experienced a bit of anxiety during my freshman and sophomore year. Every time I would like go home or come back to school, it was just that transition always kind of threw me off.
Mhm.
But my junior year, I felt like super alone and was really depressed, and I didn't want to be around my friends at all. And then I would feel lonely because I wasn't around them, and it just kind of the cycle continued.
Mhm.
And if I was around my friends and enjoying myself, it was because I was really drunk and
Yeah.
just pushed it all off. But I just kind of dealt with that for pretty much for junior year on.
Wow. Did you let anyone else know how you were feeling?
I think I was really prideful in the sense where I just wanted to keep it all to myself because I thought I could handle this,
Mhm.
and I definitely could not. My friends kind of knew that there was something going on, and they would ask me about it occasionally. I'd just be like, "No, I'm fine. There's nothing wrong. Just having a bad day," and would just kind of go with it. But I think they also knew that there was more to it, but I wouldn't admit it, so there was not much to do.
Do you know why you wanted to kind of just keep it to yourself and put on a brave face? That why you didn't want people to know how you were feeling?
I think I think it was pride, but I think it was also like just this fear that no one would care about it.
Mm.
And I know that that's not true. Like even though my friends were all partying, like we did still have really good like relationships,
Yeah.
and they do care, and I'm still friends with a lot of them, and I know that they would have been so supportive of me, but I just for some reason believed that no one would care. I think
Isn't
that's kind
it?
of where like the enemy snuck in and just
Yeah. I was going to say it's the enemy as well as our own self-talk.
yeah.
Sometimes we believe these lies, and it's one of the best reasons I can think of that it is important to share how you're feeling with at least one other person.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
it would have been so much easier if I would have just talked about it.
Yeah.
It would have saved me a lot of hurt.
Yeah. And I think the wrong things get magnified when we keep them in the dark.
Yeah.
I think that's why the Bible tells us to bring things into the light, because in the light, they become proportionate. They become what they really are. And I think in the darkness, they get magnified and we see them as so much bigger and more complicated and heavier and impossible.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Once you graduated and moved home, did things get easier for you, or did your symptoms get worse? What happened?
I think some things got easier. I no longer was like in like a heavy drinking scene, so
Mhm.
there was no longer that pressure, and I felt comfortable around my family. So in that sense, it was just a lot easier. I was kind of in my comfort zone.
Mhm.
But after graduating, you kind of have the entire world in front of you. And you're like, well, now what? So I
Yeah.
just felt a lot of like I had a job, but I just felt a lot of pressure to figure out, okay, now what am I going to do? What am I going to like? Am I going to do this the rest of my life? Where am I going to live? And just so many things, and not going to school for almost 20 years and then just suddenly being done is a
Yeah.
very strange transition.
Yeah.
Feeling
Yeah.
like you went from all these responsibilities to now, well, really, I have nothing to do.
Yeah.
It was challenging.
Now, why do you think you finally told people that something was going on?
God kind of took me to a point where I physically could not hide it anymore. I
Wow.
There was days where I couldn't go to work because I was just having panic attacks, and I couldn't lie anymore about it because my family knew that there was more to it than I just didn't want to go to work that day.
Yeah.
I could barely even be around like my close family or anyone without just crying. And they just kept asking me, and I felt like I had no choice but just to let them know what was going on. And once I finally opened up and talked to them about it, there was just so much relief.
I bet. Gosh, I can't even imagine. I'm just listening to you, and I can kind of hear in your voice as you're recounting that time. That just must have been so overwhelming for you.
Yeah, it was a lot, but I got through it somewhat quick. Like once I started talking about it, I started going to therapy.
Mhm.
I talked to my doctors. I started at that point really going to church because my parents were like, this is one thing that can help,
Yeah.
and started reading my Bible. And it was just kind of like a weight was lifted. And I was like, if it was this easy, why did I not do it 4 years ago?
Yeah. That's a powerful question because,
Yeah.
again, I think that's the whole thing of both our own self, our own hearts are telling us, to just take care of it. You've got this. You're okay. No
Yeah.
one needs to know. But the enemy certainly doesn't want you doing what God has for you to do. He doesn't want you walking in your calling.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if there's even just an inkling of an area where you're struggling, it's really important to share because it just multiplies itself.
Yeah. Yeah. And just like having it out there, like it's not a weakness. And I
Yeah.
think that's what I saw it as for so long. And I'm like, no, it's a strength to be able to admit that I can't do this on my own.
Absolutely. It's so important that we share the places where we have struggle or where we've had trauma or where we've fallen into a pit and been there for a while and had to kind of claw our way back up again and not allow those things to make us afraid, but instead share them with people so that the other people that are out there right now that haven't gotten as far, they're still struggling, can have some kind of hope.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that they know there's somebody else out there who knows what I'm going through.
Yeah. I really wished that at that time I mean, I knew my dad had experienced this, but
Yeah.
other than that, it wasn't something we talked about that often, like anyone. And so it wasn't something I felt like it was easy to share because no
Yeah.
one I knew other than my dad really experienced it.
Well, mental health is slowly becoming more understood, but people didn't talk about your mental health.
Yeah.
Can you imagine back in the 50s if
Yeah,
you had,
exactly.
it wouldn't have even been something you could probably tell your family about.
Yeah. And I'm like, it just gives me more like encouragement to share now because I'm like, if
Yeah,
I would have had this, I could have gotten help sooner.
that's right. Well, my daughter is a psychotherapist, and so I'm constantly, when I'm talking to people, on the lookout for if somebody is struggling with anything, where they need to reach out and talk to someone, that's the first step to encourage them to
Yeah.
do that. But also, if they need more than that and they need tools, to encourage them to go to therapy
Yeah.
because it really can be life-changing.
Yeah. Yeah, I can.
Could you tell us about the time? So you started back to church and you started
Yes.
serving with your mom because your mom was serving, and I believe it made more sense. We go to church together, everyone. So I believe it made more sense for you, to go at the same time with her. So you started to serve with her a little bit. And then you got involved in a community group. How do
Yes.
you think being in community group helped you?
I was very hesitant at first. I pretty much was just kind of going to church like and going through the motions.
Hmm.
But one week, our worship pastor and his wife invited me to their community group, and I was like, why not?
Right.
How bad could it be? And and I was really afterwards shocked that I agreed to it because I went into that not knowing a single person. And my parents were like, she's gonna hate this.
Hmm.
Why did we let her go? And I came home and I was like, that was great. Like felt so good to just be surrounded by other Christians and just in such an encouraging environment. And it was really new for me because I went to a public college where I didn't have any of that.
Yeah.
And they like pushed me to dive deeper in my faith. And I just like looked forward to it every week because it was just such a great environment to be in.
That's awesome. I love community group. I've been in so many different ones, and they all kind of have their own, I call them different flavors. It's like
Yeah,
some of
yeah,
them are all the same kind of person. Others are really diverse. Some do a lot out in the community, and others really just dive deep into personal relationship with Jesus. Some do it all. But regardless, we're meant to be in community. That's how God created us. And it's so important to
yeah,
have that.
yeah. Yeah, it definitely was like one of the biggest changes in my faith, just being surrounded by that. I was like, okay, this is
Yeah.
normal. Like, I don't have to feel like I have to hide this, or it
Well,
was just so easy and I felt like I could be myself.
here's another good thing. It was the worship pastor and his wife who asked you, but it's another really important thing. People invite people to your small groups and your community groups, or whatever you call them at your church. Invite people. There are people like Emily who need to be in community who aren't yet,
Yeah.
and who are going to grow and thrive once they realize that there's this great place to go.
Yeah. And I'm like, all it was just a, hey, we have community group on Thursdays. Do you want to come? I was
Yeah.
like, sure.
Yeah.
Like, how easy was that?
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, you began serving at church. How do you think serving others affected you? And can you tell us about like what you did? Who did you end up working with?
Yeah. So I think since my dad was a pastor, it's kind of just engraved in my head. Like I kind of said earlier, just we always served, we were involved. And so when I started serving at our church, my mom, my dad, and my sister were already involved.
Mhm.
So I was like, I guess I'll just do it too, because why not? And I didn't really think anything of it. I was like, oh, this is no big deal. But then one of my friends in our CG mentioned about serving with our youth group. And I
Mhm.
feel like I immediately just felt God being like, yeah, this is where you should be serving. Like, this is important.
Mhm.
And this is kind of this area where I could grow in my faith, but also help others. So that was kind of one of the big areas. And then I also took photos.
That's
That's
awesome.
that's
You
just what I
had
do.
you mentioned to me that when you were a kid in youth group, you had this memory that all of the leaders seemed to be your parents' age or your parents' friends, and that you had always wanted someone closer to your own age to connect with, that's just maybe a little older than you,
Yeah.
to kind of speak into your life. How do you think God's using that desire now as you're pouring into these kids?
Yeah, so I grew up in like a Methodist church.
Hmm.
So the age group was children, like high schoolers, and then there's just a large gap to their parents. There was really no one in between. So our leaders were like my parents and then my friends' parents.
I'm
So
just laughing because that's how our church was too.
yeah, I'm like, that was just all I knew.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was great to have them serving and seeing that example, but it was so hard to connect with them. There's just such a big age gap.
Yeah.
So then when I got the opportunity to start serving, I really wanted to help bridge the gap between students and people like their parents and just kind of give someone that for them to talk to who understood what they were going through, but still had like an adult perspective.
Yeah. It's so important. It's so important. I mean, pouring into the next generation isn't limited to people who are older.
Yeah.
I think that everybody can pour into those who are a little bit younger
Yeah.
if they have something to share that the others don't have yet. And it's so encouraging to and way cooler. I'm sorry, but it's way cooler for a kid that age to connect with someone your age than to be connecting, with someone my age.
Yeah, they definitely try to keep me young, but also make me feel really old at the same time. They talk about things and I'm like, what? I'm not that old.
Well, it's weird because my people are like your age. My people, for some reason, are anywhere from like 18 to late 20s, early 30s. And that's who I've just always found myself surrounded by. And for my kids, it was so weird because a lot of my friends were their friends. And my daughter was like, Mom, you like have more friends than I do, and like more social media things going on, and I kind of had to learn all that stuff because I was hanging out with that group. But
Yeah.
then later on, God used it because I started a blog and then I wrote books. And then now I have platforms for different things as well as doing the podcast. So I already had navigated all that because I was just doing what he said and pouring into the next generation. So it's cool the things you pick up along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. It is really, really fulfilling.
Now, how well would you say you handled change?
Honestly, not very well. But I've gotten better.
Yeah.
I feel like my family, we've kind of just been thrown a bunch of curveballs, and I've just slowly learned that I just got to go with the flow. And after growing in my faith, just kind of learned that God's ways they're better than mine. Still brings a lot of anxiety to me. Any big change still makes me all anxious inside, but I now know that that's where the enemy is like, oh, I see this opportunity.
Yeah.
Like, let me tear it down. And I know that that's not God, that's the enemy. And I know to push that away.
That's awesome. I mean, that's such a great thing to have in your tool belt that now you know. And I love that you said, yes, to be honest, I still don't like it and I don't do well with it, but I'm getting better.
Yeah.
What else can we do but get better in the areas where we struggle?
Yeah. I'm like, it's never going to be easy, but I'm learning to manage it.
Very, very good. Now, I understand that you moved out into your own apartment recently. What was that process like for you?
It was really exciting. I was supposed to move out. I talked about moving out in like 2020, but then we decided to go into a global pandemic, so that threw off my timeline a bit. But I was so excited to just kind of have my own space and do what I wanted. But as it approached, I was an anxious mess. I let myself believe that this was the worst idea I've ever had and that I couldn't do this. And it was really rough. The week moving out, I pretty much I didn't really go to work. I was just so nervous about everything. And my mom kept trying to reassure me that like, it's okay.
Yeah.
Like, if this doesn't work out, we're still here. It's no big deal.
That's awesome.
It's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
She's like, but go with this. Like this is good for you.
Yeah.
And it's been so good. As soon as I kind of moved in, everything was great. I'm still super close with my family, but it's really nice to just have my own apartment. And have a great roommate. And it's really awesome.
That's awesome. I'm very glad for you. And, what better thing to do than try, and to know that your family was there for you. You had a place to go if it didn't work out.
Yeah.
And that's how you get better.
Yeah. It's like, I know I have to push myself out of my comfort zone or I'm never going to get anywhere.
Oh my goodness. I have been so stretched out of my comfort zone over the past 10 years. I don't really know that I have a comfort zone anymore. Every time I think, okay, everything's good, then I'm like picking up and moving by carload into my parents' home to take care of them during a pandemic, starting a podcast in basically a closet that I made look cute and, made it soundproof. And just every time I think, all right, I've got this, I'm good, everything's just, even keeled, I feel like God says, okay, let's try this. And I think the change is really good for me. And I think it's good for all of us. I think the more we do it, the faster we say yes.
Yeah. Yeah. It becomes much easier once you keep pushing yourself. And it's so much easier when I know that like God is telling me to do this.
Absolutely. Because really,
he wouldn't tell me to do it if it was a bad idea.
Yeah. And he's going to do it with you. Yeah. Like you're not on your own. Whatever you don't know how to do, he does.
Yeah.
Now you're a creative person, but you're also quite introverted. What is running a business like for you?
It's pretty challenging. I tend to if I get really overwhelmed, I just kind of retreat and I push everything off.
Yeah.
And when you run a business, there's always something that needs to be done. So it's constantly overwhelming. But I'm just kind of pushing through it. And I love what I do, so it makes it worth it.
That's
to have
awesome.
those overwhelming moments.
Now, just to be clear, your business is a photography business, so you get
Yes.
to be creative, but I bet you when you get to the editing, like, what's that like for you?
I am so like meticulous, and I will spend hours on photos,
Yeah,
and it's crazy. And I most of the time I sit there and I'm like, no one's gonna notice. I need to
except
relax a bit.
you know.
Exactly. So I mean, it's a good thing for my clients because they're getting
Yeah.
you're getting a lot out of it. Um, but
Are you able to reel yourself in now a little bit?
oh yes, I've
Yeah,
definitely
yeah.
worked on my workflow, and I know where I can give and take on some things. Because I'm like, for my own sanity, I can't
Well, you're
spend
not alone.
that much time.
I've talked to a lot of creative people, and even myself when I'm doing something creative. Um, I think a lot of people tend to be perfectionists,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's
absolutely.
strange because God gave us this thing that He does. He's a creator, and some of us get to create. And even people who don't like creating should try it because we are reflecting His image when we create something out of
Yeah,
nothing. And I've got to say, though, sometimes I can get a little out of balance, like even if I love decorating a room, like reconfiguring it or whatever, making it work, so to
me too.
speak. And did you ever get like a new item, you absolutely love it, and you bring it home and you find just the right spot for it, but then everything else in the room has to move?
Yes, I went shopping this weekend and pretty much just redid my entire living room.
Yeah, so I mean, sometimes I'll be moving everything around until it feels right, and I'll stop and I'll be like, what is wrong with me?
Yep,
And I then stop and I thank God for making me creative and kind of throw up a prayer like, hey, maybe you could just help me chill with this and be at
yep,
peace. But normally the next morning I get up and I'm like, no, that doesn't go there, and I fix it all again, and eventually I get it right. But
yeah.
I can't imagine me trying to edit things all the time. Like I love taking pictures, but sitting there and trying to make everything just right in that same way, I think I would have trouble reeling that in.
It's hard. You definitely have to. A lot of times, I need to step back and be like, this is something I need to finish later because
Yeah.
I'm not going to get any further on this,
Has that
and just
taught
come back to
you
it.
anything in other areas of your life?
It's definitely, I think, taught me to be more relaxed about a lot of things.
That's good.
I just need to stop overthinking things and just go with the flow. And it's okay. It's no big
That
deal.
that might be the title for this, Finding Gratitude, Going with the Flow, because I always
Yep.
have to think about you. I keep hearing the phrase. So how do you use the talents that God has given you to serve Him and serve His kingdom?
So I began taking pictures at church a few years ago.
Mhm.
And at first I was like, yeah, I like taking pictures, no big deal. But I didn't necessarily see how that was serving God. And now I can see that these photographs that I'm taking are some of the first impressions that people get of our
Yeah,
church, on our social media, website, and all these things. And I'm like, that is so cool that I get to like authentically capture people worshiping and in community. And it's not, it's not staged.
yeah,
It really kind of shows people what our church is and that we're really big on community.
yeah. And
And
you do
then,
the camera for the people watching at home as well sometimes.
yeah, yeah. And since the pandemic, we kind of stepped up our online service. So I started serving there. And that's been really cool because there's people all over the country watching now. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
that's amazing.
people see this and have never watched a church service or stepped in a building like that.
That's
So
pretty cool.
it's really cool to know that like I get to give that to them
I
and
love
draw them in.
that you can use your talents to welcome people in. I mean, how amazing for an introverted person to be used to reach out in that way. I mean, God, so amazing. What do you think about that?
It is really cool. I mean, the whole thing has pushed me out of my comfort zone. Um, and I get it because I'm like, I'm so introverted. So I understand now what people, how they feel in front of the camera.
Yeah.
But my goal is pretty much just to capture people like how they are and make them feel like amazing and just kind of hype everyone up so that they feel comfortable in front of the camera and that I can capture whatever is going on as it's actually happening and not, a staged performance kind of thing.
Well, I think that's awesome. And I think your family's pretty amazing. What
They're
is
pretty
your,
cool.
I mean, they are. What is your family dynamic like these days? I know, for example, that during the pandemic, your younger sister started a really cool project to encourage people and to give back, which eventually became a business. Like, can you tell us how your family chipped in?
Yeah, so my family's very close. We've kind of just, through all the curveballs we've been thrown, have just grown closer and closer. And the pandemic it was challenging on us. My sister was in her last semester of college, so she was stuck at home, supposed to be doing schoolwork, but didn't really do much. My dad's job was closed, so he was stuck at home trying to come up with things to do. I was working from home, so we were together all the time. And my sister just got so bored that she was online. She's like, "Oh, these are cute little things." So she decided to make these like macrame rainbows.
Mhm.
And she started doing it for fun. And I was like, "Oh, this is really cute. I want one." And then we kind of saw how everyone all over the world was starting to like put rainbows in their windows as like a sign of hope in a
Yeah.
really dark time. And she was like, "I think this is something I need to like give to other people." So she started selling them, and she's got such a kind heart. Instead of like making money off of it, she was
Mhm.
like, "I'm just going to give all the proceeds to like a local food bank," and literally didn't keep any money except for
That's
some
amazing.
supplies. And it was so cool.
Yeah.
Um, and she was just kind of bombarded with orders because when people find out that she was making it, it's one thing, but to find out that she was giving away the money, everyone's, we were all kind of looking for ways we could give back. And
Yeah.
that was an easy way to do it.
I think you described it as like your family had like a rainbow sweatshop going on.
Yes.
Everybody was doing all the different parts of the job because there were so many orders.
It was insane. I was working my job and sitting there wrapping rainbows at the same time. It was crazy, but it was so fulfilling. In the end,
Yeah.
we ended up donating $1,400.
Wow.
So it was really cool for just a few months of just doing something that kind of connected us all.
That is very cool. And now you take pictures for her website because now it is a business and you help
Yeah.
her out still.
Yeah, she's definitely expanded. She does markets, does a bunch of things, and it's really cool to see how that just kind of blew up, and
Well,
just because she was bored.
I'd love to see how, well, yeah, she was bored, but she could have just done Netflix marathons, She wanted to do something and then she did something good. And I love when God takes somebody's heart that wants to just do something good and offer it up to serve others, to care about others, on his behalf. And I think her business is expanding and really taking off because God loves to bless that.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and she said it's such a cool opportunity because she gets to kind of share like the rainbow is a symbol of hope, like of
Yeah.
God's promises, and that's something that someone may see something so simple, but for us, like I see it as like every day I have one in my car.
Well, yeah, I have
God
something in
has
my
promised
car
me.
from her too, and I carry around her cards. And when people ask about it at drive-throughs and stuff, I, send them her way.
Yeah, yeah, it's so cool.
It's very cool. Now, what do you think God was doing in the midst of your anxiety? I know that probably sounds like a really weird question, but how do you think he used that time and still uses it when you have anxiety to strengthen you?
Yeah, I think he was trying to like teach me that like I cannot do everything on my own.
Yeah.
Like I said before, like it's not a weakness to ask for help. And I think I still struggle with pride in thinking that I have the strength to do it. But he's kind of like helped me realize that only he can help me,
Yeah.
and and like he can provide other people in my life who can walk me through this, and that I have no control over any of this. That I just have to surrender it. And it's as simple as that.
Do you think the pandemic affected your anxiety at all?
Surprisingly, I don't think it made me too anxious. I think as like an introvert, and someone who's experienced a lot of anxiety, I always just have like a constant level of anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And I really thrive on alone time.
Yeah.
So being locked inside was kind of great for a while. I was like, this is time to recharge.
Yeah.
And I was busy the entire time. We were making rainbows. I was still able to do some photo shoots for some friends.
Mm-hmm.
I was working. So I feel like I barely had any downtime to even think about anything anxious. And it was kind of great because once things started to start back up, I had so much time to like refuel and recharge that I
Mm-hmm.
was ready to like get back out there and like see people and not be anxious about it, because I was like, okay, I have had so much time alone. I need this.
That's
Where
awesome.
usually seeing friends, I'd be like, okay, a little anxious about this. It was just like I was ready to get back out there, which was so unusual for me.
That's awesome. I've heard so many stories about how one way or another the pandemic was a kind of a reset button, a refocusing, a repurposing of people's lives. I've heard so many positive things about
Yeah.
the ways people's lives have changed if I think they let them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it definitely gave me so much more like appreciation and gratitude for everything.
Yeah.
And I think it just all that time to recharge, just reflect on what was going on in the world. I just was very
Yeah.
like grateful, and it was easy to not be anxious when you're just feeling so like blessed during that time.
Well, I know when I originally approached you about doing an episode, you had been listening to my podcast, and
Mm-hmm.
I was praying one morning, and I had given God kind of an ultimatum when I felt like He said, I want you to do this. I'm like, okay, well, you bring the people to me then I'll do it for you. And not that I wouldn't have done it, but I don't know what I'm doing. Can you please bring the people to me?
Yeah.
And so many people either referred other people, or people that I had on referred friends to me, or thought that they'd be a good fit with what I was doing. But the people that God brought to me during just my quiet time with Him, that I know, that I approached on His behalf, were really my favorite. And at first, I didn't think you were going to say yes, because I know that you tend towards being introverted,
Mm-hmm.
and that this could be, for some people, that this might cause anxiety. But it's another reason why I don't do video, and it's more like a phone call where we kind of forget what we're doing,
Yeah.
But if you would just tell everybody. So I asked you, and then what happened after I asked you? How
I
did it go?
immediately was like, I could never do this. I was like, what? No, I don't talk in front of people.
Right.
And then the next day, like God was just like, you're going to do this. No, I'm not. I was like, no, yes, this is what you're going to do. And I was like, okay. And he would not get it out of my brain. I was like, oh. I even like opened Spotify, and your podcast is the first thing that popped up. And I was like,
No way. Oh
okay.
my
And I was like,
gosh.
yeah, I think that's it. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. I don't know why. If you told me years ago that I'd be doing this, I'd be like, no, that's funny.
Well, I think, there comes along with being introverted a really big dose of humility.
Hmm.
And I I think that God likes to use people who are humble. And I also think that by you being authentic and vulnerable and brave about your struggles, that you will connect to a lot of people who are struggling themselves. And so by doing this, there's going to be an audience that you're going to reach that's so much larger. I just saw my analytics today, and it keeps going to different countries and different cities. And it has, I have no idea what's going on. It's all God.
That's
But
awesome.
it's so cool that here I am, and I'm like in this one little space in my house, and I'm reaching people with your story, with everyone's stories, with God's story all over the world. So you also, in the kids that you were working with at church, realized that anxiety and depression was something a lot of the kids were dealing with. And you had said you went to the person that was in charge of youth ministry and concerned about what you saw suggests that maybe you guys needed to talk to them. What happened as a result of that?
At first, he was like, everyone was on board. They're like, yes, absolutely. Like, this is something we need to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And then he kind of mentioned, he's like, we need someone to share what they've experienced. He kind of looked at me and I was like, I don't know why you're looking at me, because it's not going to be me. And then again, the next day, I was like, oh, God, here we go. I was like, I think I do have to do this. And we chose to do a video because public speaking is a bit too much for me.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I will push myself out of my comfort zone, but I still have limits.
Right.
And so we did a video, and I kind of didn't really think much of it, but just watching it back and experiencing that night at youth group, it was so cool just to see all of our students connected. I mean, like middle school boys paying attention, which is rare.
Yeah.
And just, I think everyone could relate to it in some way. Either they've experienced it or someone close to them experienced it.
Yeah, that's right.
And so it was just so cool to be able to share like what God was doing in my life and what he had brought me through. And like afterwards, I was like, this wasn't about me sharing anything. This is like just being able to share what God is doing.
Mm-hmm.
And like, this is nothing to do with me. It's just me reflecting what God has done in my life and can do in others.
Yeah. And I mean, it must just have given such hope. And I also think that a lot of kids' walls are up at that age, and they really aren't planning on letting anybody in. But when you're brave, the walls go down. It always takes one person, if you ever notice, one person to be brave, and then it's like popcorn popping.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, we had so many students, mention that they've experienced this or they know someone, and just it felt so good to just like know that we connected with them. And even if they're not choosing or not ready to talk about it,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, they at least have this information.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if we don't talk about it, they're not going to know what to do.
Well, there's so many seemingly taboo subjects that don't get talked about in church.
Yeah.
And it makes me a little righteously angry, because I believe that we should talk about everything. We should do so in a biblical way. But there are people struggling with issues that just don't get talked about. And it takes somebody who has had an experience with that to be willing to come forward like you did, and to be willing to share. You have to start the conversation in so many areas.
Yeah.
I mean, there are so many kids that are now grown-ups that didn't have that conversation when they were young.
Yeah, because that's how I was. I didn't really talk about it, so I didn't know like what resources were out there, who I could talk to about it. And like, I mean, the church is pretty much just made up of a bunch of broken people. And if we don't admit that we're broken, we're just not going to grow and be able to help others.
I had this conversation last night on another recording where somebody had had a time in their life when they ended up in jail, and they came back when they were out of jail, and they had grown up a Christian, and they were still a Christian. They had had a time in their life that was difficult. They had grown and learned a lot, and they came back, and basically the church was not well receiving of them.
Yeah.
And we talked about how one sin isn't worse than another sin. It's all sin. Yeah. And the one common denominator we have is Jesus. We all need him.
Yeah.
The church isn't supposed to be a bunch of well people. Jesus came for the sick.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I wish that all churches were more welcoming to everyone. I know that most try. Some are just so bound up in tradition of
Yeah.
men. And I think, that's that in Revelation when it talks about the different churches, Jesus has something to say to the different churches.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be going to the church that he vomits up out of his mouth.
Right.
That's not the place where I want to be.
Yeah.
So, it's time
It's
for
hard
everyone.
because it takes a lot of vulnerability to,
It does.
and that's not something everyone wants to do, but like God wants us to talk
Yeah.
about this.
And we live in a world where, look at what's going on. The internet's wonderful for things like me being able to get all over the world, but it's not wonderful for all the impressionable kids who are seeing a snapshot out of 500 snapshots that somebody took to get their very best look, and then they put 5 filters on it.
Yeah.
And change the way that they actually look, and they're comparing themselves to that. I don't understand exactly what's going on, that we can't just be who we are.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm
And
like
what is
that. And
happening?
that's one of the things that I'm like with my photography. I'm like, I just want to like capture people as they are. And I don't, you give them some poses, but like I
Yeah,
want them to capture their family interacting with each other and these real moments and like these real memories, not
it's
putting on a
beautiful.
show. Like,
Yeah, it's beautiful, and it's powerful, because that's what photography is supposed to be. It's just sad to me that I just feel like there's this competitive spirit, and people aren't cheering for other people maybe who are doing the same thing that
yeah,
they are. They're so wrapped up in the way that they look, or the way that they sound, or what they own, what kind of house, what kind of car, what kind of clothing line. And that's really, none of that stuff matters.
yeah. Like we need to see it more as a blessing from God. And these are gifts that we're given
Yeah.
and treated as that, not as I have something better than you. It's I've been blessed with this. You've also been blessed with this.
Yeah. I mean, I even see it in ministry, where people who are doing ministries outside of the church, that they're not kind of linking arms and helping each other. That's why another reason why I do this podcast. If somebody has something that they're doing and they're following their calling, and I can have them be introduced to some new people on my platform and help them do what God's called them to do, then let's do it.
Yeah. Yeah. We're meant to encourage each other and build each other
Absolutely.
up. So
Absolutely.
that's awesome.
Now, if you could give anyone out there who's listening advice, who might be struggling with depression or anxiety right now, what would that be?
I think the big thing is to talk to someone. There's 100% someone in your life that you can open up to. And if you aren't sure if you even feel comfortable with that, like doctors are there to talk to you about it
Yeah.
and can connect you to someone else. I think you can't do it alone and you need help. And I think also knowing that God is there to help you and he wants to walk through this with you
Yeah, that's right.
and pull you out of this season. And just admitting that you need that help is like the first step to getting better.
That's good advice. That's excellent. And then here comes my favorite question. If you listen, you know what it is. If you could give your younger self any advice, what would that be?
It would be stop worrying about what others think and just do, like, in a sense, what's best for me and not be concerned about what appearance I'm putting off or
Mm-hmm.
what's someone going to think if I do this or what's someone going to think if I wear this. And, like, it's not important. And I look back and I'm like, there's so many times where I was just so caught up in things and I'm like, I don't even care about that anymore. Why did I care so much about it then?
That's awesome advice. I was at the food store today, and there was an older woman. I would hazard to guess that she was probably in her late 70s or her early to mid 80s. And she was sporting the most colorful leggings I have ever seen in my life. It's really hard to describe them. They had flowers, but they also had patterns.
I
And
love
then they
that.
had some different flowers and many different colors. I think the entire rainbow of colors were in there. And she was wearing it with a button down shirt that had yet another pattern with totally different colors. And I looked at her and I thought, well, you go, girl. Look at
Yep.
you. Like she was feeling herself.
I'm
She
like,
had on
that's just
earrings
amazing.
and pocketbook, and she was just so confident. And I'm thinking, I could wear that.
Yeah.
But like we all go through the times where we care what we look like.
Yeah.
And it really doesn't matter. I years ago had this opportunity to speak somewhere, and one of the people in the audience went to Malawi with me with church, and the person who asked me to speak was asking me to talk about love, and I asked God to give me some things to say, and I was giving this example about like really being loved and it not mattering what you look like. And so literally the week that I was having this talk, I woke up one morning and I had the craziest, I don't know what happened. I don't know if like little elves came into my room at night or mosquitoes all congregated or something, but I had this crazy, like I slept really weird. And I had this very puffy, crazy, baggy eye, right? That kind of went all the way down to my mouth on one side normal, one side crazy, one side normal, one side crazy. And I thought like, oh, this would be better if both were crazy. Okay.
Yeah.
So I had to go to work that day. And the person that I worked for sent me to a place where there were lots of young moms to go get something. And I was thinking in my head as I left to go, well, by then all my makeup I tried to cover it over with had melted off. And here I'm thinking, like, I don't care what I look like, right? I can go outside without makeup. I'm fine, right? So evidently I really cared. And I'm thinking in my head, well, I could swing by the house on the way there and text my son and have him bring out my makeup bag and cover it back up again. And then I caught myself and I was like, wait a minute. I do care. What is wrong with me? So it was like this really big aha moment. So to make a long story short, I'm telling this in the audience and I hadn't really thought about it. I looked out at this person who had been to Africa with me. And when we went to Africa, we didn't have mirrors. So we were each other's mirror. And, you would tell somebody if their hair was out of place or they had something stuck in their teeth or whatever, and you just would be there for each other. And before I walked into the place, I texted her and I said, please be my mirror. And I explained what was going on. And she texted back all these beautiful things about the inside of me.
That's so
and
sweet.
I nearly lost it. And I'm like, I'm going in. I'm beautiful. But the bottom line is what she sent me is what we need. We need people in our life who know the true beauty of who we are, and we don't need to be thinking about what we look like on the outside. And I had no intention of sharing that story, so this must be God. Somebody out there, when you got the crazy eye, you can do it. But I think it was just a lesson I really needed to learn because I thought I'm good. I don't care what I look like. And I was completely wrong.
Yeah. There's so many times where I'm like humbled to be like, oh, I do care a lot more than I do, and I shouldn't.
It's constantly coming at us from everywhere, though. Our hair should be a certain color, look a certain way, be cut a certain way. Our clothes have to be this. This is what's in style. We need all the earrings, all the shoes, all the pocketbooks.
Yeah. No one's going to stop me from the earrings. But.
Yeah, I know. You got 5 pair at the market that I saw you at. But there's nothing wrong with having personality and getting the things that you like, but feeling that you can't, that you're not okay.
Yeah.
You're not good enough. without something or looking a certain way, that's not okay, because God made every single one of us unique for a purpose.
Yeah. Like just learning that, I wear this dress like this because this is how I want
Yes.
to dress, and this is what I like, and not because of it's what other people think is cool. This is what makes me feel good.
Yeah. Well, Emily, I am so thankful. I know for you, this was out of your comfort zone.
Oh, yeah.
I know
But it
you
was so
heard.
good.
It was so good to do this. I know you heard clearly from God. I know I heard clearly to ask you. And I was kind of smirking because you're like, all right, I'll pray about it. And I was like, I know you will, because, I knew he said to ask you.
Yeah.
So I just thought it might take a little longer, but evidently he was just talking to you a couple days in a row because,
Yeah.
yeah, it's clear. I'm doing it. Um, do you
I've
feel
learned
good?
not to fight it.
Do you feel good about the conversation? Are you glad that you did it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It just feels so good to just like share what God's doing and
He's
just try to
awesome.
encourage others. And it's cool. It's such an honor.
Absolutely. Well, I'm grateful. You've really encouraged me. And, I see you getting stronger and stronger and stepping more and more out of that comfort zone all the time. And I can't wait to see what God does next. And I've been toying around with this idea lately of having people back on maybe a year from now and going back through the list of people again and seeing what else God did in people's stories.
Yeah. Well, I hope he does some really cool things. I know he will. But
He definitely will. Well, I really appreciate your coming on. I can't wait to get this together and get it out to people. I would like to put in the show notes a couple of links for people so that they can look at your photography business and anything else you'd like to share. Is that okay?
Yeah. Yep. I can send you a couple links if you want.
Okay, awesome. All
Just make
right.
it easy. Yeah.
All right. Well, I hope you have a great night, and I really enjoyed our time together.
Thank you so much. It was quite an honor.
Awesome. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey, so I just want to thank you so much for spending your time with me. And I want to challenge you to go out today and to just take notice and to stop and really look around and find at least one good thing, one thing to be thankful for. If you do that today, you're going to find so many more things tomorrow without even trying. Because once you start, you begin to see what's always been there. And if you need a refill, you can come join me again for another cup. Make sure to subscribe and have an awesome day and go be grateful.